On today's Spooky Spot, we're going to be having a look at the new Neca Friday 13th Remake Jason Voorhees figure. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I have been really looking forward to doing this figure, at least the review of it. And already I can tell you, he looks awesome. I can only imagine how much cooler he's going to be when I get him out of the package. Yes, not quite Halloween. Some would almost say that Halloween really should only be for this guy right here. But why not? Let's do a review of Jason Voorhees during Halloween. There's got to be a Friday the 13th at some point in October anyways, right? So before we look at the figure itself, what we're going to do is look at the package. The package is very basic. There really isn't much at all to be said for it. You just got kind of a background forest. Looks like a forest with some blood. A bloody forest. Down below we've got a nice picture of Jason. Includes Machete and interchangeable heads. On the back, got a picture of Jason with his sack head on, his sack mask. And the read-up says, Crystal Lake has a sinister history. It is said a young boy named Jason drowned when the counselors of Camp Crystal Lake weren't paying attention. When the camp was finally set to reopen after the tragedy, all but one of those charged with rebuilding the site were mysteriously murdered. It was discovered that the boy's unstable mother, Pamela Voorhees, had been avenging the death of her son. Jason, fortunately, she was beheaded before she could inflict any more harm. But Jason survived and has been keeping watch over his eerie domain. Those who dare defile Crystal Lake and the memory of his mother meet their bloody end at the razor-sharp blade of his machete. Much like the howling winds that echo through the rotting cabins of Crystal Lake, Jason is a terrifying force of nature that cannot be stopped. By the way, I didn't have the camera far enough down. Brought to you by the great folks at Neca. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get this opened up. We're going to have ourselves a look at Jason Voorhees, and we're also going to do a comparison with the previously released Jason from Mezco. So there's a lot to be said, there's a lot to be seen. Don't go anywhere, guys. Alright, now that we've got Jason out of package, let's have a look at this fantastic figure. Yeah, unfortunately though, I have to kind of start this review, well, with a bit of reflection. We're going to reflect on where we came from, because this isn't the first time we've received this Jason. Certainly not this particular Jason, at least. If I bring in the Mezco Jason, many of us, this was the original, and this was going to be the only Jason that we thought we were going to receive in a smaller sized scale. For at the time it was released, it was actually a pretty decent figure. Yeah, okay, it seemed a little off. Some of it didn't quite make sense. It didn't quite look movie accurate, but it was a pretty good Jason. Now we fast forward, of course, to Neca's release of Jason, and it's not really until you get the two together that you kind of see night and day comparisons. I mean, the elements are there, but you can certainly outright see that Neca has taken it to the next level and given us a much far superior figure. That's what I wanted to say. Just show you guys a back here. One glaring problem was always a big issue for me, and I don't even remember if I commented in this during the review of this guy, was that I always thought that as nice of a figure as the Mezco was, his mask always seemed really small to me. Or it just seemed oddly shaped. I don't know. Of course, I'm noticing it more now as I'm comparing the two figures, but if I compare it over to the Neca is really just an absolute step up than the Mezco version. I really don't want to turn this whole review about talking about how better the Neca is to the Mezco, but really, ultimately, that's what's going to happen. Certainly, the Neca stands a lot taller than the Mezco. The NECA also, which I like more so as well, NECA has just a straight-on pose of the figure. Mezco, on the other hand, kind of gave him this weird stance where the one leg is kind of jetting out. He seems oddly proportioned versus the NECA. The jacket as well, though they both worked well to get the sleeves, I think, accurately sculpted. You can kind of start seeing the main differences with the jacket itself. The jacket on the NECA, of course, being much more detailed, much better sculpted, especially up at the top here. Yeah. Now also, maybe I'll just stop talking. I'll stop ripping on Mezco, because for what it was at the time, it was actually a pretty good figure. But I really like the Mezco, or the NECA Jason, much, much better. The hair certainly looks a lot more realistic. The one thing I really like is I really like his neck. Does that seem strange? I really like his neck. The one thing I noticed right off the bat with the remake Friday the 13th, which I really liked, was the fact that Jason's neck, and does anyone else think this, or am I just strange? It's possible, it's just me. But I really like the fact that Jason had an extremely large neck. I don't know, it added to just the fact that this guy could grab you and just rip you in half. I just really like the fact that he had a really large neck. I know, it's strange. They've also done a better job, I think, of dirtying up his shirt. I don't know if it's necessarily it was this stained in the movie, but it looks a little more realistic versus the the white shirt that the Mezco has that's slightly stained. The mask, definitely by far, the mask is far better. It just looks like it belongs, whereas the Mezco just kind of seems like it's slipping off of his head. Of course, his hair seems a little off as well. Now, one thing as well that NECA has done is, of course, they've given us two interchangeable heads. Before we actually change the heads, I'll show you the face on Jason here. And just peel it off here. Of course, the hairs, some of them are attached to this strap, which only gives an added bit of depth. Yes, looks a little silly when you take the mask off and the mask has hair, but it definitely gives an added bit of depth to the figure once it's on. With the mask off, you've got a very gruesome Jason. Decayed teeth, of course, his one, I guess, blinded eye, his one white eye there. Now, we don't see Jason with this at any point in the movie without his mask. The one thing I really didn't like about the remake was the fact that they dump him in the water. First of all, I don't know why they would carry him. You know, he's already been thrown into a machine and the back of his head has been chewed away. And yet they put the mask on him. They dump him in the water and then they throw the mask in. Why wouldn't you think he would just leap up, and kind of like what the original would be, leap up without the mask on? But for some reason, his mask was on. I don't know. But the one thing I like, though, is that NECA has the interchangeable heads. So what you can actually do is take off the Jason head, and you can take the sack head, the sack Jason head, and peg it into place. And we've got to get this slightly pushed in there. We've got ourselves Jason with his sack mask on. I think Review Revolution said it pretty well when he was commenting on the fact that this mask just kind of levitates. doesn't sit flush against his shirt or his jacket. Nope. No, that's as far as it seems to go. Now, when I watched his review, I was thinking, well, maybe you could get the jacket kind of around it, but it does kind of just hover there. And maybe they just did it so that you could get the mask off or the head off a little easier. Now, you get an interchangeable head with the NECA, of course. If you collected the Mezco, if I just move Hockey Jason out of the way, you've got the Mezco version. Now, there was an exclusive that had the sack mask, sack head. And just give you guys a comparison of those two. I'm sure everybody who has bought both of these figures are doing the same thing that I'm doing right now, or have done the same thing as what I'm doing right now. You really like this figure when you get it, and you think, oh, you know what? I like these figures. I think they did a pretty good job. It's not until you really get the NECA version that you start looking at them and you're like, you know what? The NECA, I don't know, the NECA looks a little bit nicer. And that's really what I'm thinking right now when I'm looking at these two. They definitely look, this one looks a lot nicer than this one right here. Not to say that there's really anything wrong with the Mezco, but the NECA is definitely a far superior figure. And so much so the Mezco is not going to want to stand. He's not even going to stand. No, I'm just going to lay him down. Now, accessory-wise, aside from his head, he comes with one other accessory, and that is a very rusted, very nice looking machete. And just to kind of give you guys a comparison, I'll take the machete out that came with the Mezco. First of all, the handle is a lot nicer on the NECA. The blade certainly is a lot longer. The Mezco kind of looks cheap, doesn't it? Especially with the fact that they put these deliberate scratches and stuff in the metal, whereas NECA just really just gave it a real kind of rusted wash to it. Like, they didn't go out of their way to try to deliberately make it look aged and like it's been used and scratched. They just, I don't know, they just made it look more like a blade. So we'll just put that down for a second. And much like the Mezco, the NECA version of Jason will also have the same machete holder on the side of his leg here. If you just slightly get the blade to sit in there. No. You guys just talk amongst yourselves while I'm figuring this out here. There we go. It looks nicer, I think, as well than the, just bringing them over again here, than the smaller machete holder that the Mezco had. Give you guys a comparison between the two. I don't know, it just looks a lot nicer. Just put him there. You know what, he's going to fall down too. Let's switch his head back before we start looking at articulation, because personally I want to be looking at him more so with the hockey mask. Just pop the head back on, put the mask back on him, hockey mask, and we've got the more iconic Jason. In the way of his articulation, Jason has a full range of movement in his head. So you can get a lot of those real classic Jason kind of tilts, little head tilt. He's got a ball-jointed shoulder. You can rotate at the forearm. You can also bend at the elbow, although this one's really stiff. You rotate the hand. You can also bend the hand as well. You can rotate at the waist, and no articulation in the leg, to be expected with NECA, but of course you can move the foot up and down. You can also rotate it as well. Definitely a vast improvement, I would say, from the Mezco. Kind of a shame, because even though it is a nicer figure, you know, I think Mezco did do a pretty solid job. They did a pretty solid job on their figure at the time that he was released. For what he was a good figure. But it just goes to show, given the right property license to the right toy company, it's definitely a night and day comparison. If you can find him, I definitely would say the NECA Jason is a far greater figure. Sculpt-wise, articulation-wise, the fact that, of course, he's got a removable hockey mask, finally, that the Mezco did not have. But definitely a step up. If you guys can find it, I would say go out of your way and pick up the NECA Remake Friday 13th Jason Voorhees. And maybe you guys can pack this guy up. Yeah, he's still nice. I like him. But today's spooky spot, we were looking at the definitive Friday 13th Remake Jason Voorhees. This is the one to get, guys. A fantastic job to NECA who sculpted this. Definitely worth picking it up. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time. Whoosh.